I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
Who would have thought that the first African-American president of the United States, born in Hawaii with a Kenyan father, could have roots in Tipperary, Offaly and Limerick? Tonight on Nationwide, we'll meet Dick Ben and Tom Donovan from near Shinrone, who are President Obama's closest country cousins. In 1849, Fulmouth Kearney left Moneygall to join family members in New York. He was the Kearney that has been proven to have been President Obama's direct descendant. But what of the family the Kearneys left behind? The country cousins who stayed in the old sod.
This all started as a training exercise. I wanted to show somebody who was new to the job how different records could actually interconnect and why it was actually important to take the scenic route and to actually cross-reference different documents.
Fiona Fitzsimons and her colleagues at historical research company Enniclan have tracked President Obama's Irish roots back to 1698, further than anyone else. Fiona has discovered the earliest connection the Kearneys had to Shinrone, where they acquired this mill.
So this is the mill at Cologues, and this building is of interest to our story because this mill is the first point of contact that we actually have for the Kearneys in Shinrone. This here is a copy of an indenture from the Registry of Deeds, and in November 1728, Michael Kearney, who was a cousin of Joseph Kearney, President Barack Obama's direct ancestor, took out a lease on the mill of Cologues. And it actually poses the question whether or not the Kearneys were originally from Shinrone or whether they came to this village because they were able to get a good deal on land here. Because if we actually take a quick look in the document, it actually states that Michael Kearney is to have the premises 2 years rent-free in consideration of putting the said mills in substantial repair. So obviously he got a good deal.
The Kearney Mill is well over 300 years old, but time has taken its toll on a building that once was the centre of the community, providing employment and services to farmers for miles around.
Now we can see here from around by the side some of the age of the building. And if you look up here, right at the very top story, you can see the mortar is actually gone. And the stones in that architrave are actually holding each other there. It's very, very tenuous. I'd say another 5 or 10 years, and what you might see here is just a heap of stones.
Once you have one lead, you can piece together the jigsaw. From the mill lease, one of Fiona's colleagues went looking for other signs of the Kearneys' presence in the Shinrone area. At the National Library, Helen Moss was looking through a file of a 19th century landlord from the locality, and she came across gold dust, a map leading straight to the Kearneys' old farm.
Well, at any clan we like to take the scenic route to research sometimes, and if we have a chance we'll try and spread our nets as far as possible. I was interested in the Lloyd family because they were landlords in Shinrone, and I got a map of Shinrone, and lo and behold I saw the Kearney name on the map. This map was surveyed in 1826, and it says on the map that part of the lands of Garth Green, formerly in the possession of John Kearney. So it shows that the Kearney family were resident in Shinrone in the 1800s. And if you look at the map, you can see there's an avenue leading up to the Kearney holding, and they're surrounded by their neighbours, the Adams, the Corcorans and the Kennedys.
Here we are in Shinrone, and I have a copy of the 1826 map that Helen found in the National Library. You can see that this little house here is in fact the same house that's still in sight there across the road, and the entrance to Kearney's plot is through this gate here and through the yard. It's really quite amazing that it still survives. This map dates from 1826, and in 2011 the house is still here standing.
And just as the map shows, behind the house you'll find Thomas Kearney's family farm, though their farmhouse no longer exists. Using a modern ordnance survey map, Fiona can prove the location.
So this is it. This is where the Kearneys lived during the years that they lived in Shinrone. We can see from the map, which matches up with the 1826 map, there's a long narrow passage between the two houses, which comes down to this point and then opens out into a much wider plot. And using the OS map, we've identified it as being this plot of land here. There are so many beautiful old buildings in Shinrone from that time that still survive right down to the present day. And it makes me think that if the Kearneys came back to the present day, they would still recognise the village that they lived in all those hundreds of years ago, because so much of the old village remains, and it's really, really quite beautiful.
Parish registers at Shinrone Church of Ireland show who the Kearneys married down through the years. Two families in particular, the Benns and Donovans, crisscrossed the family tree many times. The Shinrone records date all the way back to 1741. Fiona's meeting two parishioners who've been through the registers with a fine-tooth comb.
We here in the Church of Ireland have the records of up to 40 records here in our books of deaths, births and marriages of the Kearney family. They would have then married within the community and moved to local parishes. Our understanding is from the records that the Benns and the Donovans would be part of those married-in families, which are part of the area here as well.
The other thing actually is that about 15 members of the Kearney family are buried in this graveyard here, but of the 15 of them, maybe half of them are children, very young children. You know, so that it's a sad feature of life that so many of these children didn't die in infancy at the time, you know. We have a record here of an Edward Hand who was baptised here on January the 10th in 1742, and he actually was a very important figure in the American Revolution.
As Joe was saying with the connection with Edward Hand, we actually, again, going back to the records, you can see it here where Edward Hand, son of John, was baptised on the 10th of January, 1742.
He studied in Trinity, and then he went as a surgeon's mate with the British Army to America. But in America he switched to the other side and he fought against the British in the American Revolutionary War, and actually became one of the people who elected George Washington the first President of the United States. So we have a connection with the 44th President here and also the very first President.
Up to now, it had been thought that Henry Healy from Moneygall was the closest relative to President Obama. But on Enniclan's family tree, the Healys feature only fleetingly. Fiona decides to meet Henry to find out what he's been told about his ancestry.
Can you tell me where exactly does the Healy connection come in?
The Healy connection comes in between the marriage of Joseph Kearney and Sarah Healy, married in 1761 in Shinrone. The discovery of that link came, I would say, before even the president's roots were found, because an uncle of mine had been conducting research with Roger Kearney in Ohio, and he had linked up with our family to trace back the Irish side. Fiona, we're also conscious that our family aren't the closest connection. I suppose the reason we got out there first was because the research was done by my uncle, and when the announcement was made with the Kearneys, we were able to make the initial link immediately. Since over the past few years, we know that there has been a link with the Donovan family based in Roscrea and Burskane, and there's also a link with the Benns. So while we know we're not the closest, it's still great to be able to say you have some shared genealogy with the President of the United States.
As Henry told Fiona, there are closer relatives to President Obama out there. Fifth and sixth cousins, in fact, and they've never spoken about their kinship before. You can find them down the road near Shinrone, on the same land they've been farming for over 250 years. Fiona's on her way to meet Tom Donovan and Dick Benn, neighbours who have a direct line to the President. Indeed, Dick still has three uncles who have an even closer link to President Obama. The connection began with the marriage of Phoebe Donovan to Joseph Kearney in 1825. And Phoebe's parents were Mary Benn and Fulmouth Donovan.
We're now here in the kitchen with President Barack Obama's Irish relatives. So I think I should watch my etiquette. in addressing you two gents. Thank you very much. So can you tell me, when did you first know, or when did you first hear that you were actually connected to Barack Obama through that Phoebe Donovan?
Well, my daughter was researching the Donovan family tree, and she just, as you're doing a computer, she just happened to click on Donovan and whatever, and Phoebe Donovan came up. And at that stage, our ears pricked and got her kind of interested. But it was on Entlan, your people were working on at that stage, and something therein we got her kind of interested in. But we didn't know until then.
Dick, when did you first know that your family, the Benns, were directly connected to President Barack Obama's Irish ancestors?
The first I heard about it was I was working down the fields in the tractor, and I heard it on the radio that the Benns and the Donovans of Ballygortee were connected to Obama. Was the first I heard of it.
The Donovan house is still standing down there.
Yes.
But it's a stone house at the same time.
It's a stone house.
So it's a good sturdy house from...
Pretty sturdy, yes, it would be.
Okay. So Dick, the Benns have been here quite a while. So I wonder, what do you know about the earliest Benn family history?
Well, as a small child, I remember my parents saying that the Benn family originally came up from Limerick, and they thought that they were religious refugees. They felt, but of course these things are a little bit hazy with time. That was my understanding of it, and I was quite small.
Right, and you told me that you had found a letter which your mother wrote to...
Yes, I found a letter that my mother wrote to a Malcolm Benn in Canada in '99.
Okay, and what I found interesting is that here she actually put down in writing, and she writes, "We believe the Benns may have been Huguenots. This branch of the Benn family came to Tipperary from Limerick, settled in and around Rossgray, and all lived by farming and still do." So it would seem then that...
That's our understanding of our history, yes.
Now that's actually interesting, and I think it's something I'd like to certainly explore further.
Yeah.
Fiona was struck by that letter written by Dick Benn's mother in 1999, stating that the Benns were religious refugees who settled in Limerick. So it's back to the Registry of Deeds to see if there are any records of Benns in Limerick.
We went looking for Benns in Limerick to see if there was any, to see if we could put legs to Dick Benn's story that the family originally came from Limerick. And in fact, we've actually found a plethora of deeds relating to an extended Benn family in Limerick from the 1709, 1710 period up to the early 1800s. What I find really interesting about this document, though, is that here we have, in this marriage settlement, there's literally in two lines, one follows another, you have the name Ben, but you have the father spelling his name William Ben, B-E-H-N, and the son spelling his name B-E-N-N. So in the space of a generation, he's anglicising a name, I presume to assimilate, to fit into the culture that he's moved into.
Where do you think that could have been from then?
I have no clear idea. B-E-H-N, it sounds North European.
So it looks as if the Benns, President Obama's cousins, aren't originally from Ireland at all. Fiona consulted David Butler, a specialist at University of Limerick, to find out where the Benns may have come from. Archivist Noreen Elliker leads the way to the vault at St Mary's Cathedral in Limerick.
This is the strong room for St Mary's Cathedral, but
Wow.
also for a lot of records from the diocese.
Oh, wow.
I think these are the ledgers that you need.
Have a look at. Excellent, excellent.
St Mary's holds the records for all the defunct Church of Ireland churches in the diocese, including St John's, where the Benns practised in the 1690s. By the early 1700s, the family were well established in St John's parish. Their daughter Trophaia was baptised in this register in 1712.
And here we are, 1st of February. Trophaia, daughter of William Ben.
1712. So my hunch is that as the spelling was certainly a B-E-H-N right up to the middle of the 18th century, that I thought at first it might be Danish, but I'm now thinking, yes.
And why Danish?
Well, Danish because, or indeed Dutch, because William, Prince of Orange, who later became King William, he was very short of troops, and in Europe there were monarchs, Protestant monarchs, who were, shall we say, very flush with troops, but not very flush with cash to pay them.
And they then would have come in here maybe during the time of the first or the second siege of Limerick during the Williamite Wars.
That's right. There were quite a number. In the winter of 1690, a lot of troops wintered in Munster, and approximately 15% of the Williamite troops were, shall we say, from Danish regiments. But not all of the Danish regiments were of Danish extract. So while I thought originally it was Danish, I can now say for certain, after speaking with the Royal Danish Military College in Copenhagen, that it is not a Danish surname. Well, we can say with some certainty that it is Flanders, Denmark, Holland, most likely Flanders or Holland.
So it looks like President Obama's ancestors were, well, not quite Irish, but the President will have a few new relatives to greet on his visit, and the Benns and the Donovans have been given an invitation to meet him next week. Fiona has been up and down every line of the Obama family tree over the last 4 years, so what has she taken from the experience?
We've managed to trace the President's family tree back to the early 1700s in Limerick. We've also traced back cousins who are still farming the same land they've been on since the 1760s, and they're still there down to the present day, which is extraordinary. It's a fabulous story. It's great to have been able to unravel that thread and keep on following it to actually come up with these answers and with these wider stories. And it's great to have to give to the President at the time of his visit to Ireland.